It wasn't the smell that woke her, it was the silence. As the morning sun began to creep across the quiet streets of St. Petersburg, Florida, Pansy Carpenter stood outside apartment 607, gripping a sealed telegram in her hand. She had knocked 3 times already. No answer. The hallway was warm, unusually so for this early in July, but what truly stopped her was the doorknob. It burned. Not a little, enough to sting her palm. Alarmed, she stepped back, glancing at the number once more before rushing downstairs to call the police. Moments later, responders arrived. They forced the door open. Inside, the apartment was eerily still. There was no roaring flame, no smoke-filled haze. Just silence and ash. A fine, gray blanket of it, coating everything like some malevolent snowfall. At the center of the room sat what remained of Mary Reeser, or rather, what didn't. Her body was gone, reduced to ashes in a way no natural fire ever could. Only her left foot remained, still wearing a black house slipper. A few fragments of her spine were discovered near what used to be the chair she sat in. And then there was her skull. Shrunken. Not cracked, not burned, shrunken, like a porcelain doll's. St. Petersburg Police Chief J.R. Reichert stood over the scene, confused and unnerved. His official statement said it all. "We request any information or theories that could explain how a human body could be so destroyed." Because the apartment was untouched, the wallpaper, the furniture just a few feet away, pristine. No burn marks, no scorching, not even smoke damage. It was as though fire had chosen Mary Reeser, and her alone. This was no isolated mystery. The incident would soon be grouped into a string of events. It describes something almost impossible. A human body igniting without warning, without external cause, reduced to ash, as the world around it remains perfectly intact. Years later, it would happen again. December 1966, Coudersport, Pennsylvania. John Irving Bentley was a retired physician, quiet, polite. One winter morning, a meter reader entered his home and noticed a sweet, sickening smell, something between burnt pork and ozone. When the door to the bathroom creaked open, the reader screamed. All that remained of Dr. Bentley was the lower half of his right leg, still inside a slipper. The rest of him, gone. In his place was a hole in the bathroom floor, scorched black, like the mouth of hell had opened and swallowed him whole. But once again, no signs of a house fire, no spreading blaze, just a human body, incinerated with almost surgical precision. November 1979, Bolingbrook, Illinois. Beatrice Oski was preparing Thanksgiving dinner. Her family never even heard her scream. When the smoke alarm finally triggered, all they found was a pile of gray ash in the kitchen. Her shoes, untouched. Her torso, vanished. Her surroundings, barely marked. These cases weren't folklore. They weren't urban legends whispered over campfires. They were real, documented, investigated, filed away under a label that terrified even seasoned coroners. Unknown origin, possible spontaneous human combustion. And the question lingered. How does a body, composed of over 60% water, simply ignite and disappear? Theories, of course, came flooding in. Some whispered of curses, of ghostly rage. Others blamed ball lightning or even rogue cosmic rays. But none of them stuck because none of them explained why so many of these victims shared the same eerie pattern. Almost all of them were elderly, overweight, and lived alone. Many were known to be heavy drinkers or smokers. And in nearly every case, the source of fire was somewhere nearby. A cigarette, a fireplace, a flicker in the dark. This led to the most accepted, if not terrifyingly plausible, theory. The wick effect. Imagine a candle. The flame burns the wick, but it's the surrounding wax that truly fuels it, melting slowly, keeping the fire alive for hours. Now replace the candle with a person. The clothing becomes the wick. The body fat becomes the wax. If someone passed out, drunk, sedated, or weak, and a small flame caught their clothing, the fat beneath their skin could begin to fuel the fire. Slowly, silently, until all that remained was ash, a foot, and a slipper. And it would all burn in place without spreading because the body itself became the furnace. In 2016, the BBC tested this theory. They wrapped a pig carcass, chosen for its similar fat-to-muscle ratio, in a blanket and lit it under control. The results? The pig roasted, cooked, but it didn't vanish. It didn't become ash. It didn't combust. There was something missing. Enter Brian J. Ford, a biologist determined to unlock the truth. In 2012, he released a theory that added another piece to the puzzle, something volatile, hidden inside us. Acetone. The same highly flammable chemical used in nail polish remover and paint thinner. According to Ford, certain metabolic conditions, like alcoholism or extreme low-carb diets, can cause the human body to produce excess acetone. If this chemical builds up and a flame is introduced, the body could burn at temperatures high enough to match cremation. Ford built small pig meat puppets, soaked them in acetone, and set them alight. They burned violently, hot enough to mimic the horrifying details seen in real SAC cases. Just like Mary Reeser. Just like Dr. Bentley. Just like Beatrice Owaski. But then comes the bigger mystery. If this is real, why doesn't it happen more often? Why aren't people combusting in front of security cameras? Why haven't emergency rooms reported spontaneous fires erupting on living patients? Why so few? Some say it's because the perfect storm of conditions is almost impossible to replicate. Others claim that these cases are covered up or too deeply disturbing to publicize. And then there are those who whisper of something darker still. Something unnatural. Something watching. Waiting. In 2013, in Sequoia County, Oklahoma, first responders entered a home filled with smoke. Inside, they found a man's body, burned beyond recognition. And yet, there was no furniture fire, no spread, just a man lying alone, consumed in flame. The local sheriff, a veteran investigator, made a rare admission to the press. "I'm not ruling out spontaneous human combustion. That case too remains unsolved." So maybe the answer lies somewhere in the science. Or maybe it waits just beyond it, in a corner of reality we're not ready to face. A body burns, a room stays still, and the fire never leaves a trace. They thought they had counted every body, but one leg refused to belong. April 19th, 1995. Downtown Oklahoma City stirred with the rhythm of a normal morning. Employees entered the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, sipping coffee, waving to colleagues, swiping ID cards. The air was ordinary, familiar. At 9:02 a.m. that normalcy shattered. A Ryder truck parked just outside exploded, its cargo rigged with 5,000 pounds of homemade explosive. The blast ripped through the concrete and steel like tissue paper. In seconds, a third of the building collapsed in on itself. Cars ignited. Nearby structures buckled. Glass rained down like hail across 12 city blocks. 168 lives lost. 19 of them children. Rescue teams swarmed the ruins, working against time, pulling survivors from twisted metal and rubble. But amid the chaos, a discovery was made that would haunt investigators for decades. A single human leg, unattached, buried deep within the wreckage. It was intact, severed at the hip, but strangely unclaimed. At first, no one questioned it. After all, the dead were many, and the bodies broken. But as the weeks passed and funerals concluded, one realization set in. All victims had been accounted for. All remains had been identified, except one. The leg had no match. It didn't fit into any autopsy. No victim had been reported missing a limb, and DNA was inconclusive. For investigators, the horror of the bombing took a new shape, something quieter, more insidious. A question without a name. Soon, suspicion grew. Was this a misfiled body part? A labeling error in the morgue? No, cross-checks ruled that out. Was it an extra victim? Someone never listed among the casualties? That theory made headlines, until a match was proposed. The leg, some said, belonged to Lakeisha Levy, a young U.S. Air Force member who died in the explosion. DNA seemed to support this. But when her body was exhumed for confirmation, investigators were stunned. She had already been buried with two legs, one left, one right. Neither showed signs of trauma. They were hers. So whose leg was she buried with? And whose leg still lay in evidence storage, tagged and sealed, decades later? The media had a field day. Bombing victim buried with the wrong leg. Whose limb lies in her grave? The mystery appendage that won't be identified. But inside the FBI, panic stirred. The Oklahoma bombing case was supposed to be airtight, evidence sealed, suspects apprehended, timeline confirmed. The presence of this extra limb shattered that illusion. Was it a missing victim? Or worse, a fourth bomber? Conspiracies bloomed like mold. One theory stood out, whispered across Reddit threads and late-night AM stations. The bombing was never just an act of domestic terror. It was a cover-up. The story goes deeper than fertilizer and anger. Some claim that the Murrah building housed classified investigations, files tied to the Whitewater scandal, Waco siege, or even covert CIA operations. The bombing, they said, was a deliberate strike to bury secrets under concrete and flame. And the unidentified leg? A casualty that wasn't meant to be found. But in the years that followed, no evidence surfaced. No missing person tied to the site. No fingerprints, no matching DNA. Until a Reddit comment surfaced from a former investigator. A throwaway line that changed everything. We all believed it was hers. The homeless woman in the blue coat? She panhandled in front of the building every morning. No one ever reported her missing, but she was always there. According to him, many in the force believed the limb belonged to a nameless transient, someone living in the cracks of the city, burned away by history. And maybe that's all it was. An unknown woman. A random tragedy. But then again, why wasn't her DNA ever matched? Why didn't anyone come forward? Even decades later, the leg still sits in evidence storage, preserved, isolated, a relic of a moment when truth itself collapsed with the rubble. And in a sealed metal drawer, surrounded by tags and photographs, one human leg remains, waiting for someone to claim it. It starts like any other obscure RPG rulebook, and ends like the diary of a collapsing mind. Back in 2002, a strange little project appeared in a corner of the internet. It was called the One Paragraph RPG. Created by someone under the alias Matthew/C++, it promised a unique gameplay experience. But what began as a niche tabletop game slowly morphed into something much darker. The creator renamed it Hybrid. And over the next several years, it evolved into a spiraling labyrinth of nonsense, growing to a monstrous 551 rules, each more confusing than the last. But don't let the number fool you. These weren't rules you could follow. They were scattered equations, broken sentences, half-mated formulas, and references to things that didn't exist. It didn't just feel unfinished. It felt deliberately broken. Some readers tried to decipher it, treating it like an... They mapped flowcharts, compared equations, posted translations. But no matter how deep they dug, they always ended up in the same place. Nowhere. For example, Rule-212 references a combat system based on dp/c2 over lp if the spiritual modifier exceeds delta x. But none of those terms, c2, lp, were ever defined. Not once. And worse, some math was just wrong, as in impossible to solve. Then it got stranger. Mixed between the rules were entire movie reviews, a brownie recipe, a rant about mind interference, slavery, and finally, a theory on demonic signal frequencies hidden inside fax machines, all posted with dead seriousness. At first, people thought it was a troll, a prank, an elaborate joke to mess with bored RPG nerds. But trolls don't usually stay online for over a decade, and they don't write blogs, update new pages, and defend their rules with essays that spiral into schizophrenic poetry. Because that's what happened. Even after the original website was shut down in 2009, Matthew came back in 2016. He wasn't done. He kept building. Today, Hybrid isn't just a broken game. It's a manifesto, a warning, a monument to obsession. No one has ever played it. No one has ever finished reading it. And if you try long enough, something about it begins to feel too intentional. Like it's trying to teach you something, or drag you into something. They say the author still posts, still updates new entries, still builds the game, piece by piece, in some forgotten blog. If you find it, don't try to understand it. Just scroll away. When the camera rolled, he didn't speak. He just nodded and handed his friend a loaded rifle. In the early 1970s, the art world was shifting. Painters turned abstract. Sculptors went minimalist. But Christopher Lee Burden, he chose something else. He chose pain. At just 25 years old, Burden's senior project at the University of California wasn't a painting or a sculpture. It was a box. A locker. Inside it, Chris Burden himself, naked, curled up in the dark. He stayed there for 5 days. No food, just a jug of water and another to relieve himself. He didn't move. He didn't speak. And the audience, they just watched. But that was only the beginning. Burden's next performance came 1 year later, 1971. It would be titled simply, Shoot. He stood in a gallery, faced a crowd, gave a friend a rifle, and said, "Aim for my arm." The plan? A light graze, a symbolic gesture, but the shot went off-center. The bullet tore clean through his upper arm. Burden collapsed, bleeding. The audience screamed, and the legend began. To Chris, art wasn't supposed to be beautiful. It was supposed to make you feel, even if that meant fear, even if that meant watching someone suffer. And that's exactly what he gave them. TV Hijack, 1972. He appeared on live television, calmly discussing performance art, until he pulled a knife on the host. He didn't stab him. He just whispered. This is part of the piece. The crew cut the feed. Transfixed, 1974. Burton took off his shirt, laid on the back of a Volkswagen Beetle, and had nails driven through his hands, crucifixion style. The car was then rolled slowly through a California neighborhood as curious onlookers stared in horror. Some said he was insane. Others called him a visionary. But Chris never gave them answers. He only offered the pain. As the years passed, Burton moved on from body-centered art. He created massive installations, structures of light and steel, some displayed in the most prestigious museums in the world. But those who knew him knew where it began. Not with sculptures, not with canvas, but with blood, fear, and silence. Chris Burton died in 2015. But somewhere, deep in the archives of experimental art, a grainy video still exists. A man steps into frame, raises his arm, nods once, and dares the world to look away. It was supposed to be a perfect night at the amusement park. Sydney, June 9th, 1979. The city buzzed with weekend laughter, neon lights, and the electric hum of roller coasters overhead. At Luna Park, the air was thick with popcorn, sea breeze, and childhood dreams. Among the families visiting that night was Jenny Godson, her husband John, and their two young sons, Damien and Craig, aged 6 and 4. They were on a short holiday. Just a simple night out? They had 4 ride tickets left. So the boys begged to ride the ghost train. John agreed to go with them. Jenny smiled and said she'd wait, grabbing ice cream nearby. She never saw them alive again. At 10:15 p.m., smoke curled from the tunnel entrance. But no one panicked. You see, the ghost train was famous for its illusions. Flashing lights, fake screams, cardboard skeletons. So, when riders saw fire flickering inside, they assumed it was part of the thrill. It was. Within minutes, the ride was engulfed in flames. Real ones. Survivors described it as hell inside a tunnel. Pitch black, no alarms, no sprinklers, just smoke, confusion, and screams. Some escaped, most didn't. 12-year-old Jason Holman made it out in time. As he stood outside, waiting for his friends to follow, only flaming, empty carriages rolled out of the tunnel. Inside the charred wreckage, rescue workers found 7 bodies. 6 of them were boys. The 7th, John Godson. They were burned so badly that at first, paramedics thought they were just melted mannequins, props from the ride itself. Officially, the fire was ruled an accident. An electrical fault, they said. Poor wiring, nothing more. But something didn't feel right, because just 12 hours later, the site was demolished. No further investigation, no second opinion, no chance for deeper truth. For decades, the official story held. Just a tragic electrical fire. A terrible accident. No foul play. But behind closed doors, whispers never stopped. Why was the site cleared so quickly? Why were key witness statements never followed up? Why did the lead detective, Doug Knight, refuse to open a proper inquiry? In 1987, Australia's National Crime Authority reopened the case. Their conclusion? The original investigation was inadequate and ineffective. But still, no one was held accountable, and the years passed. Then, in 2021, everything changed. Journalist Caro Meldrum Hanna launched an independent investigation. She dug through old files, police records, and long-buried testimonies. What she found was horrifying. Multiple witnesses had claimed they smelled kerosene before the fire broke out, a scent far too strong for faulty wiring. Others saw shady men loitering near the ghost train. A teenage girl overheard one of them say, "It'll start soon." None of those leads were ever pursued. In fact, several witnesses said they were pressured to stay quiet. Why? Because Doug Knight, the same officer who rushed to shut the case, was allegedly working for a powerful figure in Sydney's underworld. His name was Abe Saffron, nicknamed Mr. Sen. He was a known crime boss with a reputation for arson, bribery, and political corruption. And according to leaked reports, Saffron had his eyes on the Luna Park property, a prime waterfront location worth millions. What better way to drive down its value than to burn it to the ground? There was even a photo taken earlier that day, before the fire. It shows Damien Godson, the 6-year-old victim, posing with a man in a bizarre horned mask. Some believed it was just a mascot. Others weren't so sure. The government has since reopened the case. They've offered a $1 million, 0 cents reward for any information leading to a conviction. But decades later, the damage is irreversible. Jenny Godson never remarried. She visits the memorial every year. No answers, no justice, just 7 names carved in stone. And in the shadows of Sydney's Harborside, people still whisper, the ride didn't malfunction. The ride was a coffin. And someone, somewhere lit the match. It only took one Google search to realize I no longer owned my identity. It started innocently enough. A bored evening. A random curiosity. He typed his full name into Google just to see what would come up. At first, it was harmless. Old high school records. An outdated LinkedIn profile. A couple of embarrassing photos from college. But then, he scrolled further, and that's when it all changed. Buried between search results was a link to a People Finder website. Clicked. No password, no verification, just information. His full address, his cell phone number, his email, even his salary estimate and relatives' names, all neatly listed on a page anyone could access. His stomach turned. And he wasn't alone. Across the internet, a hidden economy thrives. They're called data brokers, companies that collect, organize, and sell personal data scraped from public records, social media, shopping habits, even data breaches. You never signed up. You never gave permission. But somehow, your life is already there. And worse, someone's buying it. To them, you're not a person. You're a profile, a product. And when that data ends up in the wrong hands, the consequences can be devastating. Identity theft, bank fraud, SIM card hijacks, fake accounts in your name, all starting from data you never knew was exposed. For years, these companies operated in the shadows, legally, to disguise themselves as background check services. Others claim they're helping people reconnect with lost friends. But behind the friendly UI is a market designed for criminals and corporations alike. A one-stop shop for social engineering, phishing, blackmail, or worse. The rabbit hole goes deeper. Entire communities on the dark web offer tutorials on how to exploit these sites. How to build fake identities, steal medical records, even bypass facial recognition using the data they find. All without hacking a single thing. Just searching. Some services, like Aura, now offer tools to fight back. They can opt you out of hundreds of data broker sites automatically. They offer identity theft protection, VPNs, and password managers in a single app. But even they admit, the threat is growing faster than anyone imagined. So the next time you Google yourself, and you see something too personal staring back, just remember, it's not a glitch. It's not a coincidence. It's your life. For sale.